No. Hi, everybody. We're live on a different platform today. Today, Instagram and Facebook decided to be down, so we didn't let that bring us down, and we're going live anyways.
We're live, we're here, and we're going to use this replay to put it on our other platforms too, because no one knew we were doing this live, so nobody's here.
So it's just us. It's basically a Zoom call. A recorded Zoom call. Here we are.
Yeah.
But we're gonna thanks for watching this replay of us talking about our next fruit of the Holy Spirit, because this is our 9-part series. So this is number 2 when we're talking about joy. So getting into joy, a lot of people confuse joy with the feeling of happiness, kind of like the same thing. So when people use the term joy, they kind of think of it's like, oh, I'm really happy, I'm really joyful. But happiness, the difference between happiness, feeling, and joy is that happiness is fleeting, where joy doesn't rely on like our emotional state, and joy can only be fully realized in God. So while happiness is described more as an emotion, joy is more related to kind of like a state of being that we can find in God, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's important when we're talking about such, I think that the mark of a Christian is oftentimes joy, right? You know, they say there's something about them, they have this joy.
Right.
And we don't want to think of it as a happy clappy, like this thing that you have to force. It isn't about that at all. It really is about a deep abiding sense. So this comes, let's talk real quick about there's multiple references in the scriptures, like there's various words they use, like in Hebrew and Greek. And one of the Greek words that they use for joy is called, I think I'm saying it right when they say chara. So, yeah. One of the Greek translations for joy or gladness is chara, and that's derived from the word charis, which is the Greek word for grace. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really cool way to think of it, that we recognize that chara, joy, is produced by charis, grace of God. Mm-hmm. So that teaches us that, you know, joy is not a fluctuating thing. It's not something that we can force. It really is, it has a divine origin. It flows from the Holy Spirit. That's why it's called a fruit of the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. And one of the best ways that I've heard it described in a theological dictionary is that joy is an orientation of the heart. Mm. Right? So that's like so super important to understand there, is we're not talking about that you could be going through one of the deepest sufferings in your life, one of the hardest times, one of the biggest trials, and still have joy. Because it's an orientation of your heart. It's a decision that you make, just as you decide to love, you decide to have joy, you decide to have the Holy Spirit working in you. And there's moments that I've experienced this in some of my deepest sufferings, such as when my parents were dying, that you could still be suffering and feel that grief and also feel joy. And we'll get into the scriptures what that means, but orientation of heart, remember that if you forget everything else.
Yeah. Great definition of what joy is.
Yeah.
But we hear joy the most in the Bible. There's like 4 different things that joy is related to when you hear the word joy in the Bible. So the first one is a response of the soul to a great and wonderful discovery, such as truth or communion with God. So 2 examples of that in the Bible is in Luke chapter 1, when like Mary and Elizabeth are talking, and she said, "For as soon as I heard the sound of your greeting, the child in my womb leaped for joy." So it's like a response to something, a wonderful discovery. And then another one is with Zacharias meeting Christ, that he made haste and came down and received him with joy. So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's a response of the soul towards a great discovery. I love that one.
Yeah, that's cool.
A second one is joy can be referred to as a personal fullness or sense of completeness in one's entire life. So that's referenced in John chapter 15, verse 11. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you and your joy may be filled. So it's talking about filling our lives with joy.
Being fulfilled. Okay, cool. All right.
And the third one is a deep peace, which comes from the indwelling of the Holy Spirit within a person and lasts despite all hardships. So in John 16, verse 22, so also you now indeed have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart shall rejoice, and your joy no man shall take from you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about, right? Of going through that time with like my parents who were your grandparents, and you're feeling grief, sadness, all these things, but no one can take away your joy. You still can have these moments of great consolation, experiencing love, finding joy in precious moments with them and their last moments. So you can be going through extreme hardship, but it won't affect it.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great, John 16, 22. That's a great one.
Mm-hmm. And then the last one is that joy is a fruit of faith, hope, and love.
Ooh, I like that. So the more that we kind of work on our faith, on those are the three cardinal virtues. The more that we work on developing those cardinal virtues with God's grace, we can grow in joy, right? Ooh, I like that. Yeah. There are a couple of references to scriptures that I wanted to add. And first is a great one in reference to joy. My favorite actually is from James 1, 2 through 4, which talks about the testing of our faith. And so it says, count it all joy when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete and lacking in nothing. So this really, I love this reminder. Is like, it's not like, hey, be happy. No, they know that you're not going to feel those fuzzy feelings. You're not going to be excited that you're going through suffering necessarily. You're not going to have those type of emotions about it. But consider it joy. Consider it joy, because why? Because it's going to produce steadfastness as you suffer. And as you meet these kinds of trials, it's going to test your faith, which will produce steadfastness. That's the hope, right? Mm-hmm. And then from that, then we become perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So if we know that the end result, if we know, like, for example, I just went to physical therapy right before this, right? And I was talking with the physical therapist, and I was like, look, I'm willing to go through this dry needling crap, which like hurts like heck. If the result is going to be that it helps reduce the pain overall. And so I will put up with this if I get this. That's right. Kind of like that same thing, right? Like if I know that I'm going to be made perfected through this trial, and I will grow in steadfastness and fortitude and strength, my faith will increase, then I can do this, So it just gives you that end goal to look forward to, right? Another one would be 1 Thessalonians 1:6, which talks about that. So this is Paul's letter to the Thessalonians. I don't know why I'm having trouble saying that. But they were under a lot of stress due to persecution. Mm-hmm. But in the midst of it, they continue to experience great joy. And again, that's what we're talking about. Right. That they became imitators. It says, and you became imitators of us and of the Lord, receiving the word in great affliction with joy from the Holy Spirit. So who gave it? The Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. So I would say one thing that you really need to do if you're saying, okay, I have a more cynical kind of, like vibe with me. I'm not really one of those people that naturally ask the Holy Spirit for joy. I think that would be one of the big takeaways from this is like, if you want to grow in these fruits, ask the Holy Spirit to help you grow. It may then be that you undergo a trial and you're thinking, what the heck here? I asked for joy and then I went into I had to get like a root canal done or something seriously. But remember, it's not based on circumstances. Mm-hmm. So God may be trying to help you to grow in perseverance, to grow in steadfastness, and for you to then come through that trial with joy on the other side. To say, look, I didn't let this disturb my peace. I didn't let this rock the boat. I still found my peace and my joy in the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Yeah. And it's funny because next week we're going to go into peace. So that the joy definitely ties into peace. And you see kind of like all these fruits of the Holy Spirit just really like feed into one another as we continue to go into all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you guys, I don't know if you guys know who Rick Warren is. Have you heard of Rick Warren?
Mm-mm.
So he is a pastor and he's written a lot of Christian, but I think it's like the purpose-driven life is like his big, like his best is what put him, I think, maybe on the map, whatever. But his wife, Kay, wrote a book about joy. And I really recommend that. Kay Warren, if you look that up. But basically, she just reinforces a lot of this, but she says it's kind of this outlook that you want to see the blessings in every day, right? So joy really is cultivated, I think, kind of like you think joy and gratitude, I think, are very, they feed one another, right? Mm-hmm. The more that you practice gratitude, and they've shown this, like studies have shown that your brain changes by doing a gratitude practice, right? I mean, it's not just like, just to, I don't know, like some kind of new age practice or something like that. Like physiologically, it has effects, and stuff. So, I mean, what's the big takeaway, Alyssa, right? It's not about being upbeat, right? Mm-hmm. It's really kind of this idea that the way she describes it, this glorious realization there's still beauty and loveliness to be found. They're inseparable. And Kay Warren actually suffered through cancer, and I'd have to look up to see. I can't recall if she if she survived that battle or not. But I know that she really kind of talked about like joy and suffering are, and Rick Warren talks about this. Like if you think of joy and suffering, like the two poles of a train track, and our lives are going back and forth like slats between these two metal rivets here of a train track. Joy and suffering are very close together, right? Yeah,
you always see like those viral videos or YouTube videos of like somebody who's going through, like you said, like cancer or kids with Down syndrome. They have the most joy, those people. And you're like, how can you have such joy and you're going through this such like sufferable time in your life? And you see that how close these things are together.
Yeah, they're very, I think that in the Christian walk, joy and suffering aren't that far apart, and so really it's the way that also the Catechism describes this is that we kind of have this assurance, this confidence in recognizing our helplessness. We recognize our utter dependence on God, the Creator. And I think for some people that's very unsettling, right? I mean, how does that sound to you, Alyssa? Like, does that bring you like peace and joy, or does that make you feel like I'm out of control?
It brings me personally like peace of mind. I know I can only find peace when I know that it's in God's hands, but I understand why people would be like, what do you mean it's in God's hands?
Right.
It's like out of your control. It's in like, and we, it's not tangible. It's not like God, like, hey, I'm talking to you, God, like, and you're talking back to me. No, it's something that takes faith and hope and love to your all of this in, and it can bring so much joy and peace if you let it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's our approach to that, right? If things are out of our control, if things are out of our hands, and we have a great free download on the website that's one of our most popular, right, about the sphere of control, and talking about focusing on the very few things that we can't control, right? Our goals, our attitude, our dreams, our emotions, our response to other people. Those are some of the examples of the sphere of control. And really, like you said, all these other things rest in the Creator's hands. And if we could kind of take this approach to the eternal, where we connect the things that are happening internally, and we connect it to the eternal, and then we can interpret these external factors that are happening in a way that we look through the eternal. We say, okay, it's in your hands. I can't control it. My worrying about it is not going to change anything. How many times have we talked about anxiety being useless and worry being useless, right? That we can then kind of like detach from trying to drive all of these outcomes, that hopefully will produce happiness. Because I think that what do we often hear? Oh, I just want you to be happy. I just want you to be happy. I want, parents want their kids to be happy. People want their spouses to be happy. Everybody wants everybody to be happy. I want you to have joy, right? I want you to have joy. I want you to have something that no one can take away. So what's the last little tidbit here? Because I think it's really powerful, Alyssa, the last line of our notes here.
That you cannot avoid pain, but you can avoid joy.
That is powerful. Yeah.
You can't, pain exists, it happens, like we can't avoid it, but we can choose whether or not we see joy in these situations or not, and that's really up to us. It's in our circle of influence.
That's it. How am I going to respond when somebody it could be something as simple as someone cutting you off in traffic, to these big things, like you said, like a cancer diagnosis, somebody living with terminal illness, loss of a parent, loss of a child, loss of a loved one. All of these things, like it's unavoidable in this life with pain, but we can make that choice to choose joy, to ask the Holy Spirit for the help to grow, to become more joyful. And I really do believe that the times that I've had people say that aren't Christian, and they're just like, there's something about you, there's something about you, and that is joy, and I could be going through something totally crappy that day, or something I'd be going through a tough point in my life even, but somebody sees something, and that's the joy of the Holy Spirit in there to say, I'm going through difficult circumstances, but I will not let that affect the joy of the Lord that's in me. And that I really think is found in those two things that we said, right? Is that I'm not in control and God's in control, and that I find rest in that. I find rest in letting God be in control of my life. And then I'm growing through these testings of my faith and all of these things like we talked about in James, that I don't let that get me off track.
Yeah.
Joy. Make a choice. Do it. Choice
and joy.
That's right. So just remember, we're not preaching to fake it till you make it here, guys, of being false in this. You could really be going through, there's times where I felt honestly that I was losing my joy because of the intensity of the suffering I was going through. And so it's okay for some time to recognize that your grief, your sorrow, your suffering may be very deep and intense, where you just do not have a connection at that time with joy the way that you normally do. And don't feel like you've lost it or it's unrecoverable. I feel like somebody needs to hear that right now, I think that we just need to recognize that there may be times where it's maybe in the background, okay? These other feelings are in the forefront. They need to be worked through. And I will say that there were times where I felt like my joy was obscured a bit, like it was in the background. But I don't think I ever lost it. It's just that I needed to process those other emotions and feelings first. And so don't try to just put a smile on your face and just be like, the joy of the Lord, and stuff like that. Be authentic and realize that in a season of life that's very challenging, it may not be, this strong feeling that you associate with necessarily in the moment. Doesn't mean it's not there, and it doesn't mean that it won't come back, because as I worked through those things in therapy and in inner healing and in restoration with the Lord, my joy became more prevalent and probably even greater than it was in those times from before, because of the suffering I went through.
Yeah.
Hang in there.
Choose joy.
Choose joy. Okay, so next week we'll be talking about faith then, huh?
Peace.
Oh, peace. Sorry. Yeah, that's right. And we'll put this replay up on YouTube, and we can download it and bring it over to Instagram again. We'll be on Instagram, hopefully next week again, right?
Yeah, hopefully it comes back.
So that was the plan, but we said, hey, we got Crowdcast, we could jump on here. So I'm glad we could do this, Alyssa.
Yeah. So we're praying for you guys. Let us know any prayers that you need. We're here for you.
Yeah, hit us up. Restoration is our ministry, and we're at littlewithgreatlove.com, and you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, and Crowdcast.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys.
God bless you. Have a blessed day.
Bye.